In this episode, we dive into the most horrifying shark attacks, from a commercial diver that accepted a job forgetting the dangers that night has to offer in the ocean, to a salvage diver that didn't notice a mako shark was lurking nearby. But first, let's talk about a surfer who was caught in the jaws of a great white shark. The morning of June 15th, 2014, broke crisp and clear along California's rugged coastline. A gentle offshore breeze groomed the waves to perfection at Año Nuevo State Park, creating the glassy conditions that serious surfers dream about. The early morning light painted the water in shades of gold and turquoise, promising another beautiful day in paradise. Zephyr Castellanos had been awake since 5:30 a.m., his internal clock perfectly tuned to catch the dawn patrol sessions that most surfers missed. At 26, the surf shop employee from Half Moon Bay embodied the California surf culture: sun-bleached hair, perpetual tan, and an infectious enthusiasm for riding waves that bordered on obsession. His co-workers knew him as the guy who would paddle out in almost any conditions, the one who preferred solitude over crowds, and always seemed to find the best waves when others stayed home. Zeph had been surfing these waters for 8 years, long enough to know every reef, every current, and every subtle change in the ocean's mood. His friends described him as fearless, sometimes recklessly so, with a tendency to push boundaries that more cautious surfers respected from a distance. He was the type who would surf during storms, paddle out in the dark, and explore breaks that others deemed too dangerous. What Zeph didn't consider was that Año Nuevo State Park sits adjacent to one of California's largest elephant seal colonies. During pupping season, which runs from April through September, the waters around the rookery become a feeding ground for one of the ocean's most formidable predators. At 6:30 a.m., Zeph paddled out into the lineup, positioning himself about 200 yards from shore. The water was crystal clear, visibility extending down 15 feet to the sandy bottom dotted with kelp forests. The pelicans and cormorants that usually dotted the rocks were nowhere to be seen, but Zeph was too focused on the next set to pay attention to nature's warning signs. For the next hour, Zeph surfed alone in paradise. Wave after perfect wave rolled through, each one better than the last. He was having the session of his dreams, the kind that would become legend among his surf shop buddies. The sun climbed higher, painting the water in brilliant blues and greens. What he didn't know was that beneath the surface, a 15-foot female great white shark had been hunting in the area since before dawn. Great white sharks are the ocean's ultimate apex predator, perfectly evolved killing machines that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. These magnificent hunters can grow up to 20 feet in length and weigh over 5,000 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies can propel them through the water at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour, and their jaws contain up to 300 serrated teeth arranged in multiple rows. During elephant seal pupping season, mature great whites patrol these waters like silent sentinels, drawn by the abundance of prey. The massive predator had been patrolling the seal colony's feeding grounds when Zeph's silhouette caught her attention. From below, a surfer on a board presents almost the identical profile as a seal, the shark's preferred prey. At 7:45 a.m., as Zeph sat on his board waiting for the next set, the attack came with devastating suddenness. The great white struck from directly below with explosive force, launching both Zeph and his board several feet into the air. The impact was so violent that 2 other surfers who had just paddled out witnessed the entire attack unfold in horrifying detail. The shark's massive jaws clamped down on Zeph's torso with crushing force, her serrated teeth designed by evolution to tear through flesh and bone. The initial bite caused massive trauma to his chest and abdomen, severing major blood vessels and causing catastrophic internal injuries. Zeph's screams echoed across the water as the predator shook him violently before releasing him and disappearing back into the depths. The 2 witness surfers immediately paddled towards Zeph, calling 911 while trying to get him onto one of their boards. Blood was pouring from multiple wounds, turning the crystal-clear water crimson. Despite their desperate efforts to keep him conscious and apply pressure to his wounds, Zeph was losing blood at an alarming rate. Coast Guard rescue boats arrived within 18 minutes of the emergency call, but it was already too late. Zeph had sustained fatal injuries from the initial strike and died from blood loss before the rescue boats could reach the scene. The investigation revealed that during pupping season, Año Nuevo typically hosts between 10 and 15 great white sharks at any given time, and Zeph had positioned himself directly in their hunting corridor during their most active feeding period. But while the waters off California claimed one life in their ancient rhythm of predator and prey, hundreds of miles to the southeast in Florida's busy harbors, another ocean professional was about to discover that some of the most dangerous encounters happen not in pristine wilderness, but in the murky industrial waters where bull sharks patrol. August 22nd, 2015, dawned hot and humid in South Florida. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete docks of Port Everglades, where the air shimmered with heat waves rising from the pavement. By 2 p.m., the temperature had climbed to 94 degrees, and the incoming tide was beginning to push warmer water from the Atlantic into the harbor's maze of channels and marina slips. Orion Blackwater wiped the sweat from his forehead as he loaded his diving gear into the back of his pickup truck. At 29, he had built a reputation as one of South Florida's most reliable commercial divers. The guy boat owners called when they needed hull cleaning, prop repairs, or underwater maintenance in conditions that made other divers think twice. His weathered hands and sun-damaged skin told the story of 5 years spent working beneath the surface in some of the most challenging aquatic environments on the East Coast. Orion's friends knew him as a risk-taker who thrived on difficult jobs that others wouldn't touch. He was the diver who would work in zero-visibility water, navigate around massive ship propellers, and clean hulls in harbors where most professionals refused to enter. That afternoon, Orion received a last-minute call from the captain of a sport fishing charter that had just returned from a successful trip. The boat's hull was covered in marine growth affecting performance, and they needed the cleaning done immediately for another charter departing the next morning. The job paid double the usual rate for rush work, money that Orion couldn't afford to turn down. Despite the warning signs, the murky harbor water, the incoming tide, and the fish blood and scraps still floating around the boat from the recent charter, Orion decided to take the job. Port Everglades is a major shipping channel that connects directly to the Atlantic Ocean, creating a highway for marine life moving between deep water and shallow harbor areas. The incoming tide acts like a dinner bell for opportunistic predators. At 2:45 p.m., Orion suited up and checked his equipment one final time. The water in the marina slip was a murky brown-green, visibility limited to maybe 3 feet. Fish scales and blood from the charter's recent trip floated on the surface, creating an oil-slick rainbow that should have been a red flag to any experienced diver. He entered the water with his cleaning equipment and descended to the boat's waterline, beginning the methodical process of scraping marine growth from the fiberglass hull. The work was routine. He had cleaned hundreds of similar boats in similar conditions. What Orion didn't know was that a 9-foot bull shark had followed the incoming tide into the harbor, drawn by the scent of fish blood and bait that led directly to his worksite. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous sharks in the world, not because of their size, though they can reach 11 feet and weigh over 500 pounds, but because of their unique physiology and aggressive temperament. Unlike most sharks, bulls can tolerate both saltwater and freshwater, allowing them to travel into harbors where humans least expect them. The shark had been patrolling the harbor's entrance when the olfactory signals triggered its feeding response. Bull sharks are ambush predators that rely on stealth and explosive power to capture their prey. In murky water, they use their acute sense of smell and electroreception to locate targets, often approaching from below or behind where visibility is most limited. 20 minutes into the job, as Orion worked at a depth of 8 feet scraping barnacles from the boat's keel, the bull shark struck without warning. The attack came from behind and below, the shark's powerful jaws clamping down on Orion's torso with crushing force. The impact drove him against the boat's hull, and his regulator was torn from his mouth as the predator began its characteristic thrashing behavior. Orion fought desperately, punching at the shark's snout and trying to reach his diving knife, but the animal's grip was unbreakable. The thrashing continued for nearly 30 seconds before the shark released its grip and disappeared back into the murky water. Harbor patrol officers found Orion floating face down 15 minutes later, alerted by other boaters who had heard the commotion and seen blood in the water. Despite immediate CPR efforts and emergency medical treatment, he had sustained severe injuries to his torso and legs and died from blood loss. But while the murky waters of Florida's harbors proved deadly for one commercial diver, thousands of miles away in the crystal-clear waters of Hawaii, a young marine biologist was about to learn that sometimes the subjects of our research have their own plans for the evening. October 12, 2016, brought perfect conditions to Oahu's legendary North Shore. The trade winds had died down to a gentle whisper, leaving the ocean surface like polished glass that reflected the brilliant blue Hawaiian sky. As afternoon melted into evening, the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the water in shades of gold and amber. Dex Thornfield prepared his research equipment on the deck of the university's 28-foot research vessel. At 25, the marine biology graduate student from the University of Hawaii embodied the perfect blend of academic rigor and island lifestyle. His sun-streaked brown hair and easy smile masked an intense dedication to his research that had impressed his professors and earned him a coveted spot in the university's shark behavior program. That evening, Dex was conducting his final data collection dive for a chapter on tiger shark crepuscular behavior, their tendency to become more active during dawn and dusk periods. The dive site off Halewa was perfect for his research, a shallow reef system in 20 feet of water where tiger sharks regularly appeared during evening hours. Tiger sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, capable of growing up to 18 feet in length and weighing over 2,000 pounds. Their distinctive striped pattern gives them their name, but it's their incredibly diverse diet and powerful jaws that make them truly remarkable. Tiger sharks are often called the wastebaskets of the sea because they'll eat almost anything: fish, seals, turtles, birds, and even garbage. At 6:20 p.m., as the sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the reef, Dex descended into the crystal-clear water. Visibility was excellent, nearly 80 feet, allowing him to observe the reef's ecosystem in stunning detail. He had been diving alone, a decision that violated standard safety protocols, but was sometimes necessary for behavioral research, where multiple divers might alter shark behavior patterns. For the first 20 minutes, the dive proceeded exactly as planned. Dex observed the typical evening transition as diurnal fish species sought shelter in the reef, while nocturnal hunters began to emerge. At 6:40 p.m., as twilight deepened, Dex noticed a large shadow moving along the reef's edge. His pulse quickened with excitement as he recognized the distinctive silhouette of a mature tiger shark, exactly what he had been hoping to observe. The shark was magnificent, approximately 11 feet in length, with the characteristic broad head and powerful build of a mature female. Her distinctive tiger stripes were clearly visible in the fading light, and she moved with the confident, unhurried pace of an apex predator, surveying her territory. Dex began documenting the shark's movement patterns, noting her methodical search behavior as she investigated crevices and overhangs where prey might be hiding. During twilight hours, this investigative behavior becomes more pronounced as they actively hunt for diverse prey species. The shark's behavior initially followed the patterns Dex had observed in previous encounters: systematic hunting movements, occasional pauses to investigate interesting scents or vibrations, and the characteristic head-swaying motion that helps them pinpoint prey locations. But as the light continued to fade and the shark's hunting instincts became more pronounced, her behavior began to change. She started moving more directly, her swimming pattern becoming less exploratory and more purposeful. What Dex didn't realize was that he had become the focus of her attention, not as a researcher observing a subject, but as a potential prey item that had triggered her predatory response during the peak hunting hours of twilight. The attack came with shocking suddenness. One moment Dex was filming the shark's approach, excited about the close-range behavioral data he was collecting. The next moment, 2,000 pounds of apex predator struck him from the side with devastating force. The tiger shark's massive jaws clamped down on his torso, her serrated teeth designed by evolution to slice through the toughest materials, penetrating his wetsuit and body with surgical precision. The impact drove Dex against the coral reef, his camera and equipment scattered across the sandy bottom. He fought desperately, trying to push against the shark's snout, but the animal's grip was unbreakable. The attack lasted less than a minute, but the damage was catastrophic. When the shark finally released her grip and disappeared back into the darkening water, Dex was left with massive trauma to his chest and abdomen. Blood clouded the water around him as he struggled to reach the surface, his diving training taking over even as his body went into shock. His research partner on the boat heard the commotion and saw the blood in the water, immediately calling for emergency assistance. Coast Guard rescue swimmers reached him within 12 minutes, but the tiger shark's powerful bite had caused massive injuries to his torso, and he died from trauma before rescue swimmers could get him to safety. Dex Thornfield's death was a tragic irony. A dedicated researcher who had spent years studying tiger shark behavior, ultimately becoming a victim of the very predators he sought to understand. The investigation revealed that Dex had been conducting research during peak tiger shark activity hours in an area known for aggressive encounters. Marine biologists noted that his presence during the shark's most active hunting period had created conditions for a predatory response rather than the passive observation he had expected. But while the twilight waters of Hawaii claimed the life of one dedicated researcher, thousands of miles away in the deep blue waters off Florida, another ocean enthusiast was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous encounters happen not near shore, but in the vast open ocean. March 18, 2017 dawned with the kind of perfect conditions that underwater photographers dream about. 45 miles southeast of Key West, the Gulf Stream's crystal-clear blue water stretched endlessly toward the horizon, its surface barely disturbed by the gentlest of swells. The sun blazed overhead in a cloudless sky, sending shafts of brilliant light deep into the water column. Phoenix Waverly adjusted his camera housing as he prepared for what he hoped would be the dive of his career. At 32, The freelance underwater photographer had built an impressive portfolio shooting for diving magazines and National Geographic submissions, but he had never captured the images that would truly establish his reputation in the competitive world of marine photography. His sun-weathered face and calloused hands told the story of 6 years spent chasing the perfect shot in some of the world's most challenging underwater environments. That morning, Phoenix had chartered a boat to take him to coordinates where oceanic white-tip sharks had been reported. These magnificent predators were exactly what he needed for his latest project, a photo essay on open ocean apex predators for a major diving publication. The dive site was perfect. Deep blue water with excellent visibility extending over 150 feet in every direction, with the bottom at over 2,000 feet below. At 1:30 p.m., Phoenix entered the water with his camera equipment and a mesh bag containing frozen mackerel and sardines. The water temperature was a perfect 78 degrees, and the visibility was so clear that he could see the boat's anchor line disappearing into the blue depths below. The first oceanic white-tip appeared within minutes, materializing out of the blue like a ghost. Phoenix's heart raced with excitement as he recognized the distinctive white-tipped fins and stocky build of a mature male, probably 10 feet in length. Unlike coastal shark species that might be cautious around humans, oceanic white-tips are known for their fearless curiosity and tendency to investigate anything that enters their domain. They're often called the sea dogs because of their persistent, almost aggressive approach to potential food sources. The shark approached with the characteristic bold confidence of its species, circling Phoenix at a distance of about 20 feet while sizing up this new addition to its territory. Phoenix began photographing immediately, capturing the shark's graceful movements as it patrolled the water column. To attract the shark closer for more intimate portraits, Phoenix opened his bait bag and released a small amount of fish blood and oil into the water. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The oceanic white-tip's behavior changed instantly, its movements becoming more direct and purposeful as its feeding instincts were triggered by the scent of prey. Within minutes, 2 more oceanic white-tips appeared, drawn by the chemical signals dispersing through the water. Phoenix found himself surrounded by 3 magnificent predators, each one larger and more impressive than the last. For nearly an hour, Phoenix captured incredible images as the sharks investigated the bait and circled his position. But as the bait continued to disperse through the water and more sharks arrived, the situation began to change. The oceanic white-tips were becoming increasingly excited, their movements more erratic and aggressive as their feeding response intensified. Phoenix, focused on capturing the perfect shot, didn't immediately recognize the warning signs. When he finally decided it was time to surface, he discovered that the situation had become far more complex than he had anticipated. As Phoenix began his ascent toward the surface, the largest female oceanic white-tip intercepted his path, her behavior now clearly aggressive rather than merely curious. The shark had been stimulated into feeding mode by the bait, and Phoenix's movements triggered her predatory response. The attack came as Phoenix reached a depth of 30 feet, still 200 yards from the dive boat. The female oceanic white-tip struck from below with devastating force, her powerful jaws clamping down on his torso. The impact drove him deeper into the water, his regulator torn from his mouth as the shark began the characteristic thrashing behavior that oceanic white-tips use to disorient and weaken their prey. Phoenix fought desperately, striking at the shark's snout and trying to reach his diving knife, but the animal's grip was unbreakable. The attack continued for nearly a minute before the shark released its grip, only to be replaced by one of the other white-tips that had been circling nearby. The feeding frenzy that followed was swift and brutal. Multiple sharks attacked in succession, each one drawn by the blood in the water and the competitive feeding behavior of the others. Phoenix's camera equipment sank into the depths as he struggled to reach the surface, but the repeated attacks had caused massive trauma to his torso and limbs. The dive boat crew, alerted by the commotion and the blood visible on the surface, reached Phoenix within 15 minutes. Despite immediate first aid and emergency medical treatment, he had sustained fatal injuries from multiple bites to his torso and limbs and died from blood loss and trauma during the helicopter evacuation. The investigation revealed that Phoenix had violated several safety protocols for open ocean shark photography, including diving alone, using bait to attract predators, and working without proper safety equipment. Marine biologists noted that oceanic white-tips are particularly dangerous when artificially stimulated by bait. But while the endless blue waters of the Gulf Stream claimed one photographer's life, hundreds of miles to the north off the coast of Massachusetts, another ocean professional was about to discover that sometimes the fastest predators in the sea strike with a speed that leaves no time for escape. July 15, 2013 brought perfect diving conditions to the waters off Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The The summer sun blazed overhead in a cloudless sky, and the Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon in shades of deep blue and green. A gentle southwest breeze created just enough surface chop to keep the water oxygenated, while underwater visibility extended to an impressive 40 feet. Captain Reef, Sharky Maddox, wiped the salt spray from his weathered face as he positioned his salvage vessel over the GPS coordinates he had marked 3 days earlier. At 35, Reef embodied everything that made New England commercial divers legendary: tough, resourceful, and willing to tackle jobs that others considered too dangerous or unprofitable. His nickname, Sharky, had been earned not from any encounters with predators, but from his aggressive business tactics and his ability to smell opportunity in the water, like a shark detecting blood. Reef had built his marine salvage company from nothing over 12 years of commercial diving experience. He had recovered everything from sunken yachts to lost fishing gear, building a reputation as the guy who could find and retrieve anything that ended up on the ocean floor. His clients knew him as reliable and fearless, the type who would dive in storms, work in zero visibility, and tackle recoveries that insurance companies had written off as impossible. That morning, Reef was preparing for what should have been a routine salvage operation. 3 days earlier, a 42-foot sport fishing vessel had sunk during a sudden squall while returning from a successful charter trip. The boat had gone down in 35 feet of water, with valuable electronics and fishing equipment still aboard. The job was particularly attractive because the boat had been carrying high-end fishing gear worth over $50,000, and Reef's contract included a percentage of the recovered value. The vessel had been targeting bluefin tuna and had been using large quantities of bait fish to attract the massive predators. When the boat sank, all of that bait had gone down with it, creating an underwater buffet that would attract scavengers and predators for weeks. What made this salvage particularly dangerous was the timing and location. July marks the peak of summer feeding season off Cape Cod, when the waters become a highway for migrating fish species and the predators that follow them. At 10:30 a.m., Reef suited up in his commercial diving gear and performed his final equipment checks. The water temperature was a comfortable 68 degrees, and the gentle current would make navigation around the wreck relatively easy. He entered the water with his cutting tools and recovery bags, descending along the anchor line toward the sunken vessel. The visibility was excellent, allowing him to see the entire wreck as he approached. Schools of bait fish had already discovered the boat, attracted by the decomposing bait and fish scraps that continued to leak from the vessel's fish boxes and bait wells. The wreck presented a surreal underwater scene, with fishing rods still in their holders and tackle boxes visible through the cabin windows. Reef began his systematic recovery process, starting with the most valuable items in the boat's cabin. The work was routine. He had performed similar recoveries dozens of times. He used his cutting tools to access locked compartments and carefully bagged electronics and personal items for transport to the surface. What Reef didn't know was that an 8-foot shortfin mako shark had been attracted to the wreck site by the scent trail of decomposing bait. Shortfin mako sharks are the Formula One cars of the shark world, capable of reaching speeds exceeding 45 miles per hour and making spectacular leaps up to 20 feet out of the water. These magnificent predators can grow up to 12 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with a torpedo-shaped body perfectly designed for high-speed pursuit of prey. Makos are known for their incredible intelligence and occasional aggressive behavior, particularly around fishing vessels where bait and blood in the water can trigger their feeding response. The predator had been following the tuna migration when the chemical signals from the sunken vessel triggered its investigative response. Makos are known for their curiosity about unusual objects, and the combination of a large artificial structure and abundant food sense made the wreck irresistible to the shark's predatory instincts. 45 minutes into the dive, as Reef worked inside the boat's cabin recovering electronics, the mako shark arrived at the wreck site. The predator approached with the lightning-fast movements characteristic of its species, covering the distance from the edge of visibility to the wreck in seconds. The attack came with devastating suddenness and incredible speed. One moment, Reef was focused on removing equipment from the boat's console. The next moment, 800 pounds of apex predator struck him with the force of a torpedo. The mako's powerful jaws clamped down on his torso, the shark's grip-designed teeth penetrating his wetsuit and body with crushing force. The impact drove Reef against the boat's cabin wall, his equipment scattered across the wreck site. The mako's attack was characterized by the explosive speed and power that makes these sharks so formidable. There was no warning, no opportunity to defend himself, and no chance to escape once the predator had committed to its strike. The attack lasted less than 2 minutes, but the damage was catastrophic. When the mako finally released its grip and disappeared back into the blue water, Reef was left with injuries that were immediately life-threatening. His surface support crew heard the commotion through his communication system and immediately began emergency ascent procedures. Despite their rapid response and immediate first aid efforts, Reef had sustained massive internal injuries from the Mako's powerful bite. The shark's teeth had penetrated major blood vessels and organs, causing internal bleeding that was beyond field treatment. He lost consciousness during the emergency ascent and died from massive trauma before being brought to the surface. His final moments were spent not as a master of his underwater domain, but as a victim of nature's most perfectly designed killing machine. The investigation revealed that Mako sharks were known to frequent the area during summer months, following the tuna migration. Marine biologists noted that the sunken boat's decomposing bait had created conditions that would naturally attract predators, and Reef's presence during peak feeding hours had resulted in a fatal encounter. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.